Welcome back. We're continuing our deep dive into housing co-ops. So we've covered the basics, but now I'm kind of curious about the history of co-ops and what kind of impact they've had, especially when it comes to affordable housing.
Yeah, one of the really interesting things is that co-ops aren't a new thing at all. They've been around for a while, and they have these deep roots in ideas about community and making sure housing is affordable
Hmm.
and even social justice.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay. The Cooperative Housing Chat podcast actually talks about a really interesting part of co-op history called urban homesteading.
right. They interviewed Andrew Riker. He's the executive director of UHAB, the Urban Homesteading Assistance Board, and he's like a total legend in the field. He's even in the Cooperative Hall of Fame.
Wait, there's a Hall of Fame for co-ops.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so tell me what exactly is urban homesteading?
Okay, so picture this. It's the 1970s. Cities are struggling. Buildings are abandoned. Neighborhoods are falling apart. And the people who live there, they decided to take charge.
Oh,
They basically started homesteading in the cities, taking over these abandoned buildings and turning them to places people could afford to live.
so they were squatting.
Not really. They worked with the system legally to get ownership of the buildings by forming co-ops.
Gotcha.
It was this huge grassroots thing, driven by this really powerful idea that housing is a right, not just something you buy and sell.
Wow, that's pretty inspiring. It really shows how co-ops can change things and empower communities.
Absolutely. And that same energy is still alive in the co-op movement today.
Yeah.
Yeah. The podcast talks about how co-ops can help with a lot of the housing problems we have now, like not enough affordable places to live and gentrification.
Gentrification.
Yeah.
How can co-ops help with that? Wouldn't rising property values affect them too?
Well, yeah, they do. But co-ops are designed to keep housing stable and affordable for the people who live there. Unlike traditional real estate, they're not focused on making a profit. So that makes them a powerful tool for preserving neighborhoods.
Okay, that makes sense. So it sounds like governments are starting to realize that co-ops could be a real solution to the housing crisis.
Yeah. The podcast mentions there's this growing movement at both the federal and local levels to support co-op development with new policies and programs.
Okay, cool. I'm starting to see the big picture now. But what about the challenges we talked about before? Things like boards having conflicts or mismanagement. How do good co-ops avoid that stuff?
That's a great question. And it's something we'll dig into more in our final part. There are definitely co-ops out there that are thriving and doing well with innovative ways of governing and residents who are really involved. And learning from them can give us valuable insights for anyone who's thinking about co-op living.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So we've been through this whole world of housing cooperatives, from how they work to their history and all that. What do you think? Are co-ops a good option for people who want to own a home? Or are all the potential problems just too risky?
Yeah, that's the big question, right?
Mhm.
And I think, like most things, it depends. We've seen that co-ops can be awesome. They're affordable. You've got that strong community. You even have a say in how things are run.
But we also saw there can be some downsides too, like that presentation we talked about. All that stuff about bad management and board problems.
Yeah.
It kind of made me nervous.
Yeah, I get it. Those are definitely things to consider. But I think it's important to remember that the presentation also talked about how residents can actually do something about those things.
Right.
They can hold the board accountable, ask for more transparency, and push for change.
So it sounds like it all comes down to having residents who are informed and involved. But how can someone who's thinking about buying into a co-op know if it's well run? What should they look for?
That's where doing your homework comes in. Before you buy in, you got to research. Look at the co-op's finances, talk to people who live there now, and really go over those governing documents. Those documents, they lay out all the rules and regulations, so understanding them is super important.
It's like a behind-the-scenes look at how the co-op works. You were talking about different ways to govern co-ops earlier. Are there some co-ops that do things differently, maybe in a way that avoids those problems we were talking about?
Yeah, totally. Some co-ops are really innovative with how they do things. Some use consensus decision-making where everyone has to agree. Others rotate who's on the board. And some have resident committees that focus on things like finances, maintenance, or even social events.
So it's not just about dodging the bad stuff. It's also about actually making the co-op a good place to live.
Exactly. And that's what makes co-ops so different. Residents are way more involved than they are in other types of home ownership.
I think I'm starting to get why people like them. It's not just about having a place to live. It's about being part of something, having a voice, and being able to make your home a better place.
Yeah, and especially now, when it feels like housing is all about money, co-ops offer something different. They remind us that it can be about community and affordability and doing some good in the world.
That's a great thing to think about. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to encourage everyone to keep learning about housing cooperatives. Maybe it's the right choice for you, maybe not, but hopefully this conversation has shown you that there are different ways to think about homeownership and maybe even inspired you to explore some new possibilities.
Absolutely. It's been great diving deep with you.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of housing cooperatives. Until next time, keep those minds curious and never stop exploring.